Welcome in, everyone. Today we're going to be talking about scaling. One of my more popular topics and something I talk about a lot, UV scaling. But in this particular case, we want to showcase essentially if you have a really long vertical container, how does the contents inside scale? And then if I were to have a really uh, wide vertical container, I'm thinking about the words, how does it scale? And in this particular case, we're going to be showcasing pivot points. So here we have the y-axis to pivot, always scale in the center. And we have exactly the same material here, but when it's done horizontally, it will actually scale the contents in the material to fit at the right-hand corner or all the way at the one axis of the UVs, or one is the x-axis. So doing a little material work on scaling and showing what that looks like together. And of course, it's so fun to put together these little grids of unique and interesting scaling materials and see how they all look together. Again, same material. I'm just having fun playing with it in different ways. With that, let's get started. And in 2024 fashion, I'm interested to showing you folks what I'm reading, what I'm doing, what I'm listening to, and you can kind of get a sense of all the fun things that I like to do and learn and investigate. So we'll kick that off and let's get on started. And we're back. So this is the material. Most of the scaling work is all being done right here. And then over here is just all the fun effects. Like I wanted a effect that would displace the contents inside and a little effect that would also follow the contents. So no matter where this was, it would actually be affecting the background material at the exact same time, and they would be paired together. But the cool part about this is I could change the pivot point position, so let's make this maybe 0. So now it's all going to be aligned on the opposite side. And let's take a look at what that does to our main container. We can see some of my displacement gets all funky up here in the corner. But again, that's just to show off some fun, unique things about this material. I could say the pivot points I want to be 1, 1. So it's always going to be in the bottom right-hand corner, no matter the container size. Save, apply that, and voila, it's always at the bottom right-hand corner, no matter the container size. So if it's vertical, it's always bottom right. If it's horizontal, it's always bottom right. And that's kind of the fun thing about it. So this material itself actually continues off of my scaled UV useful UI materials. I'll absolutely be linking this. But in here, here's a lot of fun things. If you can almost see my journey as I've been working through UV scaling. So we have the scale to fit, scale to fill X, scale to fill Y. And now we have the last one in here, which is scale to a pivot point. And what the pivot point is. So I'll link to that. And we can go and do it here as well. We also have a little scale down here. I like to put, when I test a lot of my materials, I like to put time frac on there and see what it's doing. So I can see, okay, the material is going to scale the texture from the bottom corner all the way up. And then, of course, my alpha gets a little funky. But you can see it in action here. Not that you would do this, but this is a fun way to test a lot of my work. So I do this a lot. I test the work by doing this kind of stuff. And we'll plug scale 1 back in. So that's the ratio that I'm doing. Here's kind of the same method I've had before. This ensures that if the texture is hopefully a not square, it will still work. I haven't tested it, but I assume it will work. So that is scale to fit. Here's scale Y, which means it's always going to scale to fill the Y axis. If we save this and we give it a look, you can see what it does. So it's always going to scale to fit the y-axis. And in this case, that also means clipping off it here. So let's also change the pivot point to kind of see that in action. So we probably maybe want scale to fit y at 0 on x and at 0.5, I'm guessing, in y. And let's see what we get there. Not that the y-axis really matters, but now you can see always on the x-axis it's always going to scale to fit the y container, so that's why we see this little blip here. But remember, we set the x pivot point to 0 and the y to 0.5, so it's always going to be scaling from this little marker, like right here. If you take a look at where that marker that I'm circling, that's where it's going to be scaling from. So let's put it at the classic, the standard 0.5, 0.5, and now we have it always filling, again, always filling the Y container, always filling it. We can see it in action over here. We've also got scale to fill. So this one will do whichever axis is bigger, scale to fill that axis. So the x-axis or the y-axis. And this one's scaling to fit the x-axis, which is massive. But you can see the pivot point again is at 0.5, 0.5. That's the interesting thing here. Let's change the pivot point instead to be, we want it to scale from the top. So in this case, I want to set x to 0.5 and scale from the top center. And in that case, it's always going to take the texture and scale it from the top center. And voila, now we've got a lot of corks. Not a lot of bodies, a lot of cork in our lives. Or we could even set it to the opposite, where it's always going to be the bottom of the texture. Again, maybe is useful, maybe it's not useful. There's some interesting reasons to have this, reasons for the solve, but I enjoy the approach of it. Then we have scale to fill x, and this is again scaling all of them to fill the x-axis first, and scale to fit that. And again, our y position is still at 1, so it's always going to be the bottom, scale from the bottom of the texture. And again, that's here. It's always going to be scaling as from the texture at the bottom here, and it's always going to scale to fit the texture, whatever the x-axis is. So that's this axis going on here. And that's that funky little material. It's useful in some ways and probably not useful in others, but sometimes I find a need. So let's put this back to 1. Put my Y position at 0.5. And let's scale to fit. So it's going to fit the smallest axis. So we're always going to see the texture in its full form. And voila, we've kind of come back full circle, showing it off at the beginning again. But scaling with, no matter the container size, scale to fill, scale to fit, scale to fill the x-axis, scale to fill the y-axis, and where do you want it to scale from? The center, the top, the left, right, even you could pick other coordinates in here, like it could be, instead of completely 1 on the axis of x, we're gonna maybe set it to 0.25 or 0.75, because that's closer. But it's not quite at the edge. And now we've got scaling. It's always going to be at 75% of the length of the container. So on the x-axis, it's always going to be at 75%. Anyway, some fun things to explore. Maybe it's useful, maybe it's not, but let me know, and hope you enjoyed, and more videos to come out, and want to hear suggestions or ideas of what you could be interested in learning with materials, UMG, that sort of stuff. And I'll keep trying to share what inspires me or what I find interesting and fascinating to do. And with that, cheers.